I almost didn't go to the party that night. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror longer than usual, smoothing the sleeves of my navy blue dress, wondering why my chest felt tight for something that was supposed to be fun. It was a Friday evening in early autumn, the kind where the air felt crisp but gentle, and the city lights outside my apartment window blinked like quiet encouragement. My name is Emily Parker, and at the time, I was 31 years old, working in marketing for a mid-sized firm in Chicago, trying very hard to convince myself that I was confident, capable, and unshakable. The party was hosted by a colleague, Daniel Wright, who had just been promoted. It wasn't mandatory, but in our office culture, these gatherings mattered. People noticed who showed up. They remembered who smiled, who mingled, who fit in. I told myself that was the reason I grabbed my coat and keys, locked my door, and headed out into the night. The apartment where the party was held was bright and spacious, music floating softly through the open windows. Laughter spilled into the hallway as I arrived, and for a moment, I paused outside the door, steadying my breath. Then I knocked, and just like that, I was inside. The room buzzed with conversations. I recognized faces from meetings and coffee breaks, people I'd exchanged polite emails with but never really talked to. Someone handed me a drink, non-alcoholic, which I appreciated without comment. I thanked them and moved slowly through the room, nodding, smiling, listening. Everything felt normal, easy even, and I wondered why I'd been so anxious. At first, as the evening went on, the crowd grew louder, more relaxed. Conversations overlapped. Music turned up just a little. I found myself talking to Mark Reynolds, someone from a different department. He was friendly, confident, and well-liked. We talked about work, then about travel, then about how strange it was that life never turned out the way you planned when you were younger. It was an ordinary conversation, the kind you have dozens of times in your adult life. But at some point, something shifted. Mark leaned a little closer than before. His tone changed, not dramatically, but enough that I noticed. He suggested we move to a quieter room to talk. I hesitated, then politely declined, saying I was comfortable where we were. He laughed it off, saying he just wanted to hear me better. I smiled, but inside, a familiar unease stirred. I'd felt it before in other situations, at other times in my life. That quiet voice telling me something wasn't right, even if I couldn't explain why. For years, I'd learned to ignore it, to be agreeable, to avoid awkwardness. I'd been taught, subtly and repeatedly, that saying no was rude, that making others uncomfortable was worse than being uncomfortable myself. So when Mark persisted, suggesting again that we step aside, I felt the old pressure rise in my chest. My mind raced with excuses, with ways to say yes without really meaning it, just to keep the peace. And then something different happened. I thought about how tired I was of feeling that way. Tired of replaying moments later and wishing I'd spoken up. Tired of carrying discomfort home with me like an invisible weight. I thought about the younger version of myself who believed confidence would just arrive one day, fully formed, without effort. I looked at Mark and said, clearly and calmly, no. I don't want to. The word felt heavy and light at the same time as it left my mouth. For a brief moment, the noise around us faded in my ears. Mark blinked, surprised. He opened his mouth as if to argue, then closed it. He shrugged and stepped back, muttering something about misunderstanding. Within seconds, he was gone, blending back into the crowd. I stood there, heart pounding, hands slightly trembling. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't been unkind. I'd simply stated my boundary. And the world hadn't ended. In fact, something unexpected happened next. A woman named Rachel Collins, someone I barely knew from accounting, approached me. She smiled softly and said, I just wanted to say, I saw that. And I'm really glad you said no. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. But her words stayed with me. The rest of the evening passed differently. I noticed how many small moments I'd missed before, how many people adjusted themselves to fit expectations without question. I noticed how lighter I felt, even though nothing outwardly dramatic had happened. When I left the party later that night, the city air felt sharper, clearer, as if something inside me had shifted. Over the next few days at work, I worried quietly. I wondered if I'd caused tension, if there would be whispers, if my decision would somehow come back to hurt me professionally. But nothing like that happened. Mark avoided me, which I didn't mind. No one treated me differently. Except Rachel. She started joining me for lunch. One afternoon, she told me that she'd struggled for years with speaking up, that watching me say no so simply had made her feel less alone. Her honesty surprised me. I realized then that boundaries weren't just about protecting myself. They were about showing others what was possible. Weeks passed, then months. I found myself using that word more often, not just at work, but in life. No to extra responsibilities I couldn't handle. No to plans that drained me. No to silence when something mattered. Each time, it got easier. The real change wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, and deeply personal. I walked differently. I spoke differently. I trusted myself more. Looking back now, that party stands out not because of who was there or what was celebrated, but because it marked the moment I stopped shrinking myself to fit into spaces that didn't require it. One simple word reshaped how I saw myself. No, didn't close doors. It opened one I didn't know I was allowed to walk through. And on the other side of it, I found something better than approval. I found respect.